Good morning. Can you hear me in the back?
Yes.
Okay, I might put this here and just trust my voice a little bit. Y'all can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So I am so honored to be here with the women of the Trinity Church. The Trinity Church. I am here, daughter to Althea Norcott, who is thrilled to have me in church by hook or crook. I was referred by Dr. Inger Burnett Ziegler, who is a good friend and colleague. She's a psychologist at Northwestern, and she recently became a mother, and her daughter is in the NICU, so I would just ask that you keep her lifted up in your prayers, her and her daughter Grace. So both are doing well, but still could use our prayers. So let's start with a deep breath in. The pandemic has us scared of breathing. Let's start with a breath, right? So I just want to invite you to take a deep breath in and hold it at the top. So let's take that deep breath in and hold it and then release it with a whoosh. And now that we've got some practice, let's do it again. Let's take a deep breath in, hold it at the top, and whoosh. Can't be scared of breath, right? Even if it's through a mask. Really, this morning, what I want to do is I want to pick up where the good Reverend left us. I have been joking since I heard her speak. I said I could just come up here and say ditto and walk off the stage. And I would feel like I did something here. But no, I won't do that. But you know, what she was talking about yesterday about how the pandemic sat some of us down and potentially saved some of our lives. We had immense loss, but some were saved. I felt that so deeply. I was heading into spring of 2020 with overbooked, overburdened, and wondering who scheduled me like this. It was me. So spoiler alert, it was me. I had done it. I had done it to myself. But thinking that busy meant worthy, meant productive, meant better. So I got sat down. And although I was alone for a lot of that time, I live alone, I don't have any children, I got to think about the relationship with myself, and so I learned how not to be lonely. And so I'm a relational psychologist. I'm sure I'll mention that again later, but I'm a relational psychologist, which means that we thrive in connection and we suffer in disconnection. And so I realized that I had to find connection with myself. And so that's a lot of what I want to talk to you all about today. I had been working at a pace that was unsustainable and neglecting the main relationship with myself and with God. And so I got connected with both. So I'm really happy to be here with you today. So I truly believe that I was placed here to speak with you because coming here to the invitation to speak with you allowed me to sit in the room last night and hear that message. So I just hope that I can spark and continue that fire that was lit last night. In our time together, I want to have a conversation, which means that we're going to co-create this space, which is why I wanted us to sit in small circles, right? Because we're going to, I have some things I want us to think about, but then I would like you to think about things together and then come back together. So we'll do a fair bit of that, but we're co-creating this space. It won't just be a didactic. It won't just be me lecturing. And I'd like to start and have an invitation to have a conversation with you, small. And so what I'm going to do over my time with you is that I'm going to kind of say, let's take 5 minutes, let's talk at your tables, and then I'm going to call you back with these bells, right? And so let me share what this bell sounds like, so that I won't yell, so that we can practice kind of coming back down on our own. But that's so if you hear this bell, just say, no, who's ringing a bell at me? Right? That's what these are, these chimes. Okay. So one thing I'd like to start with at your tables, and we'll just take about 3 minutes, right? We'll just have a short conversation. What do you think about when you hear the words mental health? Right? So say good morning to each other, introduce yourselves if you have anybody at the table. But I've had these for years. I'm not better at clinging them. I'm not. So sometimes you have trouble getting people talking at work. Not, that is, I see that is not something that we're going to struggle with. So what kind of things came up in your groups? Thank you, the stigma. We'll take a couple more.
Just briefly, we spoke about mental health and it being a component of our all over health. So, sort of mental, physical, spiritual in the process. And also, unfortunately, some of the stigma that's surrounding.
Thank you. So that holistic vision of, mental health is health, right? It's part of it. So we'll take one more. Get my steps in.
We talked about that it's not a them and they, it's us are sick. And we talked about how back in the day, not way back, but how we thought mental health meant crazy. And now that we've matured, some of us, we now know it means just imbalance. And that we need to keep what keeps us afloat reachable. Whether that be music, a book, whatever.
Thank you. The power of environment that creates the sickness, right? I have a colleague or there's a contemporary that, we talk a lot about PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and he started talking about PTSE, prolonged toxic stress environment. Right? And are we thinking a lot about that? We got one more comment. Okay, we'll take one more. Oh, you got another mic. Okay, awesome. Oh, she got the boot on. Weren't we just talking about Sean?
I was going to give it to her. I was on the
What was the PT? What was the
prolonged toxic stress environment.
Yeah, let me move.
Persistent toxic stress environment. Persistent toxic stress.
Yes.
Persistent.
Okay, it's on there.
Okay.
We looked at it from a word association framework. The words that came up were illness, sadness, crisis, not connected to normal society, and that's how we viewed it from the past. We also looked at overwhelmed individuals and family members.
Right. Many of us are at periods of our life where we're caretaking elders and also our youth. So I come from academic medicine, so academia, and the structure of talks historically is the way they kind of say this is how you have to have a talk, is you present the problem, then maybe if there's time, and how bad it is, and how we got there, and then maybe if there's time you present on the where you want to go or where you want to be or how to do there. So I don't like that. So instead what I started doing is starting my talks with and starting my time with people with talking about how amazing Black women are and Black girls. I do a lot of my work, in my clinical work, my research around Black girls and women, relational health, sexual decision making, trauma. And I don't want to just start with trauma, because trauma is something that happens to people, but then they're the people, right? And so I want to start with how amazing Black girls and women are. So, have you ever been in a room of just laughing Black women? Or Black girl, right? How amazing is that? It's like cocoa butter on your elbows amazing, right? It's like, right? It's like so soothing. And have you ever been around and seen a Black woman give another Black woman a compliment? You thought you had received a compliment, and then you see Black women give compliments, and you're like, oh, okay. Have you ever seen the ways in which Black girls work together? Or seen how we can work together, how we work together when we're really trying to solve something, right? And that is mental health, right? That is emotional wellness. And so we've experienced it. So it's not this thing that's unattainable. It's not like I'm gonna tell you a magic secret. you have had it in your life, and the things that we're going to talk about is going to remind you that it's in there. Right? We're going to have some exercises, we're going to do some things together, and it's just going to allow you to place your hand on that place in yourself and just remember that it's there. So it's all invitation. When we get to the part where I'm asking you to do activities, if you don't feel physically able, if you don't feel emotionally able, you take care of yourself. They're always invitations. Okay? If anything we talk about starts to activate you, you don't need it, but you have permission to take care of yourself, right? If that means flipping through your phone, if that means stepping out and making a call, if that means zoning out, you do what you need to do, okay? Okay, so let's talk about stress, okay? Let's talk about stress. So there are lots of different types of stress in the world, and not all stress is bad. I'm sure you've heard that, right? There's positive stress. There's the stress that got me up in the morning to take a shower and so that I could be here on time, right? There's the stress of putting together our thoughts when we're presenting or getting ready, right? So there's positive stress that gets us motivated. And then there's something called tolerable stress. It's time limited. Tolerable stress. You hurt your foot, right? Right. So it's a little bit more heavier. It's a little bit more of a burden, but hopefully it's time limited. Okay. And then there's toxic stress. Prolonged, unrelenting stress that occurs without supports to help us endure. And that's such an important part, without supports that help us. And we are living in times of unrelenting stress. Racism, COVID-19, domestic terrorism, political atmosphere for girls and women. And then we have our own personal experiences of unrelenting toxic stress. What are some examples that you can think of, some personal experiences of toxic, unrelenting stress? Things that people go through that endures. Work. Caregiving.
Especially
Working from home and being a caregiver. Thank you. Yeah. Relationships. Parenting. Co-parenting. Say that again. Family challenges. Chronic illness. The bills, right? The finances, right? The bills don't stop. Blended families. You know, when I was, my mentor, when I was, learning about being a psychologist, she talked to me something about gender responsive care. And what she was saying was that, when you're working with men clinically, oftentimes you're just working with men, right? It's just the man, his problems. He's able to kind of disconnect and say, like, I'm going to get myself right, and then I'm going to. But with women, you're working with her children, you're working with her parents, you're working with her network, you're working with her friends, right? And so as I think about the pieces of toxic and unrelenting stress that have come up just now, it's all of our roles that we play, right? We wouldn't not have those relationships, but we have to acknowledge that there's the stress to them. There's the chronic stress. You're like, we cannot go, we can't move on until I remind everybody how expensive gas is. And even Costco, I was like, Costco, why are you doing me like this?
I said price gouging.
Price gouging, right? In this sense of who's looking out for us? Who's looking out for us? Right? So there's lots that's simmering, right? There's lots that's simmering. Mm-hmm. And stress injures people. We know that there's traumatic injury, if something happens to our body, if something happens that violates us, injures us. There's grief injury, loss of people, things, parts of ourselves. There's moral injury when we witness things that violate our values, right? We don't have to have anything to do, right? How many people when children were being separated at the borders, felt that deeply. Right? That's a moral injury. We don't have to be at the border. That's a moral injury. So we have to be able to name it, right? Because it's acting on us. And then fatigue injury, accumulation of stress without rest or recovery. Right? Right? We have to rest. And unchecked stress becomes trauma. And so girls and women have a unique experience with stress and trauma and abuse. So it's not about comparing, but it's about understanding our unique profile. So for girls and women, over the course of our lives, childhood, adolescence, adults, our greatest risk for violence and abuse is at the hands of someone we're in a relationship with. It's not better or worse than anything else. It's unique though, because it has implications for how we connect to other people, how we connect to ourselves. And on top of that, Black girls and women receive subtle and not so subtle messages that just because of our Blackness, we deserve or can't handle the stress and abuse that they experience, that we can handle it, right? There's a lot of research out there that says girls as young as 5 is seen as understanding what they're doing, right? Responsible. They know what they're doing, right? When compared to their white counterparts. Okay, a 5-year-old baby, right? They're seen as more adult, okay? And so how does that impact us, right? How does that impact us as girls growing up to women? Well, oftentimes it makes us ask these questions. Why did this happen to me? What did I do wrong? Why me? Why is life a struggle? And those things often get turned inward, right? Feeling ashamed, distrustful, deeply distrustful of relationships. Who would want to love me? Right? Distrustful of us in relationships. I'm going to hurt them if they get too close, so let me just. And really what I find is one of the most devastating impacts of stress and trauma is that it can make you feel all alone. So the very thing that you need to recover from it makes you feel isolated and alone. It can make you feel like you are crazy. I think that came up when we were talking about stigma at your tables. It can make you feel like you're crazy for having a normal reaction to abnormal situations. Right? And then to make matters worse, a lot of what we're taught about coping fuels that isolation. So what did you hear about coping growing up? Suck it up. Never let them see you sweat. Deal with it. Get over it. Be strong. Go to church. Mm-hmm. You're not by yourself. You're not the only one. That's in the past. Kids are starving in Africa. What are you complaining about? It could be worse. It could be worse. This too shall pass. Don't be angry with your sisters. It's always darkest before the light. Right. What doesn't kill you make you stronger. You can get to heaven. Wait till you get to heaven. You can get to heaven. And something key is missing here with these things, with these messages. Well-intentioned. It's all unhealthy and well-intentioned. Sometimes. But it leaves us feeling unseen, right? Unheard, dismissed, and we have to name it, right? So much of the violence and stress that women experience in particular and girls experience happens in silence, right? Don't tell anybody, right? Your family will be hurt if they knew about this, so don't tell anybody.
And then they turn it on you. They say, why would you let them?
Mm-hmm. Why would you let them, right? And we blame the victim. What were you wearing? What did you do? What did you do to, right? Have you ever told somebody something and the first thing they said is, what did you do? Well, what did you say? What did you, right? And when we experience stress and trauma, really what's calling out is that we feel safe and heard and loved, right? And seen. It may be true that other people are experiencing other stressors, but mine is worthy, right? My pain and my stress is worthy. Well, today I want to talk to you about the power of relationships, right? Because if we can be so hurt by how people don't see us, dismiss us, the converse is true, right? We can help somebody feel seen, right? We can help somebody feel listened to, feel heard. We can listen to ourselves. And the power of relationships can facilitate thriving and recovery. But we've got to bust those myths. And so what I want to do today is I want to add to rest. Who remember this? I know quiz wasn't part of it, but who remembers what rest is? R is reclaiming your joy. What's E? Energy management. What's S? Setting boundaries. And what's that T? Time in the presence of God. So I'm going to add an R to the beginning, right? So really rest, right? I'm going to add an R. I told you made it easy for me. I'm going to say really rest, right? And the R is reconnection. So rest, yeah, really rest. So the R is reconnection. And one of the major parts in relationships, a major theme, so I want you to remember, this is something that I'd like you to remember, is that you cannot connect with other people if you first don't work to connect with yourself. You cannot have healthy relationships with other people if you do not have healthy relationships with yourself, right? It's about integrity, and integrity means what you see on the outside, I feel on the inside. I'm not saying, like, don't worry about it, take care, but inside I'm saying you're not good enough, you gotta work harder, right? I gotta have congruity, it's gotta be congruent, right? So reconnection, connecting with yourself. So a main part of reconnection is self-regulation, right? Self-regulation. And what are some signs of dysregulation? What does that look like? Being angry. Hangry. Hangry, yes, being hangry. Saying yes when we mean no. Having sleep difficulties. Overeating.
This all gets into self-medication. You just find some way to soothe it.
Self-medication. You're soothing yourself, but in ways that ultimately are harming yourself. Overscheduling, kind of like running from your shadow, right? If I stay busy, then I don't think about those thoughts, don't get to come into my head. People pleasing. A lack of creativity. I felt that so deeply when you said you overschedule yourself and you can't even be creative, right? The best parts of the gifts that we get from God, we keep ourselves so busy we can't access them. Right? We get so disconnected from those gifts. So I want us to try a couple self-regulation. Stress, violence, and trauma, like it hijacks our brain, right? So there's something called the triune brain. And I once read in a study that if you talk about the brain or have like a slide of the brain, people rate your talk better. So this is my part. So there's a triune brain, right? So you've got your survival brain, you've got your feelings brain, and then you've got your thinking and learning brain, right? And so we do our best, we show up as our best selves when we can access our learning brain, our thinking brain, our planning brain, right? So what can I learn from this? And then in our feelings brain, am I loved? We still, we can trust, we can use our feeling brain to help guide us a lot of time. But our survival brain, that's our fight or flight. That's our, I'm out of here, right? Or like, I'm zoned out, right? That's just has one job and to keep you safe, right? And the survival stress will make your survival brain turn on automatically, okay? You'll go from, what can I learn from this situation, to, am I safe? Right? Right, so you're running around like you're in a house on fire. Right? And somebody just asked, you know, how's your mom doing? Right. So we have to learn how to regulate. So this first activity I really like because it's portable. You can take it anywhere. Nobody has to know you're doing it. Okay? And so it's one that we're going to try together. And so it's one that's done in our imaginations. Okay? And it's called the 5 senses activity. Has anybody heard of this? The 5 senses activity. Okay. If you just Google 5 senses, you'll see a whole bunch. And so wherever you're sitting, I'm just going to invite you to go through the 5 senses with me. So wherever you are in this room, look around and name in your imagination 5 things you can see. And look at them. Now name 4 things you can touch and touch them. Go ahead and touch them. Feel the texture. Now how about 3 things you can hear? What about 2 things you can smell? And how about 1 thing you can taste? Saliva counts. How is that?
Different.
You can take it anywhere. Nobody has to know you're doing that. And everybody has a sense that grounds them a little bit. Right? For me, it's always hearing. I have to really be still to hear 3 different things. 5 senses. You got it. Yours free. You know, oftentimes we're worried about what's happening in the future, or we're feeling really sad about something that's happened in the past. So anxiety, depression.
Yeah.
And something like that just grounds us in the present. What's here? What can I touch? What can I see? So it's a grounding activity. It helps us to regulate. Now, and thank you for doing that, for those of you who did. And so next I want to talk about relaxing our bodies to relax our minds. Okay, there's lots of ways we can do that. But we have to remind our brains, remember, we're safe, we're loved, then what can I learn? Right? Then let me plan about what I'm going to do. You can't make decisions, or you can't be functioning at work if you're feeling unsafe, if you're feeling unloved, uncared about. Right? So I want to invite you all to do a body scan meditation with me. Okay. So you can do it sitting, and so you're going to do it in your seats. If you want to, you can close your eyes. If that does not feel safe, just soften your gaze and focus on something on the floor in front of you or on the tables in front of you. And just begin by bringing attention to your body. Notice your body seated wherever you are, feeling the weight of your body on the chair. And take a few deep breaths here. And when you're bringing that air in, your belly's rising. Think about breathing behind your heart. And exhale. And as you take in a deep breath, bring in more oxygen, enlivening the body. And as you exhale, have a sense of relaxing more deeply. You can notice your feet on the floor. Notice the sensations on your feet touching the floor, the weight and pressure, vibration, heat. You can notice your legs against the chair, pressure, pulsing, heaviness, lightness. Notice your back against the chair. Bring your attention into your stomach area. If your stomach is tense or tight, let it soften. Take a breath. Notice your hands. Are your hands tense or tight? See if you can allow them to soften. Maybe even spread them out over your knees, over your thighs, help them unclench. And notice your arms. Feel any sensation in your arms. Let your shoulders be soft. Notice your neck and throat. Let them be soft. Relax. Soften your jaw. Let your face and facial muscles be soft. If your tongue is stuck to the roof of your mouth, let it drop away and hang heavy in your jaw. Then notice your whole body present. As best as you can, take one more breath. Be aware of your whole body. Take a breath, and then when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Close your toes, wake up your fingers. We're practicing sitting with ourselves. For some people, even a minute is difficult, and that's okay. Sometimes it's about building up tolerance. Maybe take a moment at your tables and just share what that was like, because it's not always going to be good, right? It doesn't have to be. That's not the point. We just want it to be real. So share kind of maybe what you noticed come up for you, what that was like. What did we notice?
I lost the earring.
That you lost an earring? See, you might not have noticed that.
I really did. I just said,
Isn't that something?
because when I was sitting relaxed, I almost leaned over in her lap. I was on sleep. And then I just noticed that I was uneven.
So say that again.
I said I noticed that I was uneven because I got so relaxed. Really, I unfolded my ankles, I unclenched my hands, and I almost ended up in this lady's lap. And then I noticed that I said, wow, I am uneven. And I noticed I lost the earring.
Thank you for sharing. That's something, right? Just sitting with yourself, you notice as being out of balance.
Yeah.
What else did you notice? What else came up?
I noticed that I could hear my thoughts better.
Hear your thoughts better. Thank you. That could be scary for some people though, right? But that's
I
okay.
noticed that it was just a calming for me. I do yoga, so it was it was another opportunity for me to leave my body and let my body just relax.
You were like, oh, I know this place.
I have learned to sit down, not think, put my feet up, and do absolutely nothing. Don't think about nothing, don't look at the TV, don't have no music on, and I gotta sit there and I do that. So, because I got a lot of arthritis, so it don't hurt. And then my husband messed up. What you doing? I said, I'm not doing anything. Nothing. But I do nothing for a little while.
And that's something. Yeah. I love that. I love that. What are you doing?
So I felt as you were guiding, and for each part that you said, you kind of let it relax. And everything was just relaxing, and I just felt whatever was happening was just coming out. And then after you said, open your eyes, I couldn't open my eyes for just a few minutes. It was like, oh. And then I noticed that I had like a couple of tears in the corner of my eyes, and I didn't even realize that. So where is this coming from? But yet I still felt very relaxed. It was grounding.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a release in it. Yeah, maybe, right? Anybody else want to share what that was like? And thank you to sharing the microphone. Thank you.
I was going to say, I think we take so much for granted that everything is going to be working within us. So when you are still, it's listening to your heartbeat and understanding that you have one. Because we get up and brush your face, brush your teeth, get your coffee. You're not even thinking about your body functioning. And that without those functions, you wouldn't get anything. So you're able to understand that you have a heart that beats, and you have lungs that help you to breathe, and eyes that help you to see. My God, that's amazing.
Yes, it is.
That's what I felt.
Thank you for sharing that. One more.
Just to tag on to what Lily just said, I think one of the things that I noticed is that I was able to connect to my breath. And what we don't realize is that most of the time we're breathing very shallow. We're like quick, almost gasping, versus taking deep breaths. And when you stop and meditate, it forces you to focus on those deep breaths. And reconnecting to your breath is so important, because we can't live without oxygen. And so the more we can oxygenate our bodies and all of our organs, our heart, our lungs, everything, the more alive we are. And you feel a difference when you finish meditating, when you breathe deeply. So that's what I notice a lot too when I meditate.
Thank you. And we have this scary association with meditate, like we've got to be like a Buddhist monk, but we just did it, right? We just did just a couple minutes, right? Look.
I was surprised to notice how tense I actually was. You said lay your hands on your legs and unclench. They weren't clenched, but they weren't relaxed until you said that. And I was like, oh, you can let that go. And then you said, if your tongue is at the top, doggone it is. Put that thing down. So I didn't realize how tense I was until you went through the steps. So that's right.
Thank you. And thank you again for passing the mic around. Our body sends cues to our brain about how we're feeling too. Our brain sends cues, but our body sends cues. And one of the things that I noticed, I don't know if anybody else ever notices, that their shoulders are up by their ears like that. And sometimes I'll be like, no, I'm fine. And then I'm like, wait a second. Right? Or you like walk by the mirror and you're like, what? Oh. You know, what's really going on? Like, let me take an inventory of what's going on, what I got on my plate. Or if your forehead is your brow is furrowed, right? And so what you can do in those moments, there's something called progressive muscle relaxation, and we won't do it now, but many practices of progressive muscle relaxation is that you bring tension to a part of your body to bring relaxation to it. So if you notice, just shrug them up a little bit higher and then notice the difference when you drop them low, right? Or scrunch up your brow and then just relax it. Sometimes I just started going like purposely just, mowing my brow down, right, as a practice. There are also points in your face that you can tap, right? So there's so many things. I only picked a couple, but there are so many things. There are places that you can tap on your face that can cue you to release. I don't know if anybody's ever been someplace and seen some woman just tapping her face. Like, what is she doing? Right. My favorite point is right underneath my nose and underneath my eyes. You could do raindrops, you could do just small messages from your body to your brain that now it's time to relax. You start to learn how to regulate. Reverend, you talked about boundaries last night. And I want to talk a bit about boundaries because boundaries are important when you're connecting to other people and when you're connecting to yourself, right? If you let people in your space, you don't give yourself enough space and time to connect with yourself. So boundaries are important for connecting with others and also with yourself. People have physical, they have emotional, and they have intellectual boundaries, right? I talk to my patients a lot and I'll say, we talk about boundaries in this very like white Western way, right? This very like individual way where it's like, nope, you're not helping me, like get out of here, right? But that's not a reality for a lot of people, right? And that's also not really what boundaries are. That's kind of like an oversimplification. And I think about boundaries like a zipper, right? And your zipper is if your zipper is on the outside, other people control what your boundaries are. But if your zipper is on the inside, you control what your boundaries are. And that doesn't mean it means you can adjust for people in your family, for people at work, right? You can adjust your boundaries, but you have the zipper on the inside and can do that. And so yeah. Sure, and we're going to talk about them too. Physical, emotional, and intellectual boundaries. So an example of an emotional boundary is not feeling obligated to share information or not feeling obligated to answer a question when you're asked. I struggle with this one. Sometimes people will ask me a question and I'll be 20 minutes into answering it before I realize I didn't even need to do all that. Right? That didn't even require that energy for me to answer. An intellectual boundary is not letting people finish your sentences or tell you what you think. It's an example of that. Yes. And oftentimes we think a lot about physical boundaries, though. So what I want to invite you to do at your tables is to come up with a few examples in your lives, or either what you experience or what you see, of intellectual, emotional, and physical boundaries. And it could be success stories, something that you now use that you've learned over your life. Or it could be things you're still struggling with, something you've seen somebody struggle with. Okay, but we'll take a few moments. So intellectual, emotional, and physical boundaries that you've seen in your world. What are some examples that asks you? What were some examples? Or just anything that came up at your table, if you started talking about something else.
I just told them that I'm gonna cry. I had an emotional balance. And I didn't realize how bad it was until I got a bald spot in the back of my head. And when she was doing my hair, she said, "You got a bald spot." I said, "No, I don't." She says, "I'm doing your hair." "Yes, you do." And she says, "It's stress." So then I was in a bad marriage, but it was emotionally very stressful. And my daughter told me one day, she says, "Mom, you know, you're okay whenever you're in the house and it's just me and you, and it's just us, or you and the kids, or whatever." She says, "But as soon as you hear the doorknob turn," wow, she said, "your body just tenses up and it just overtakes you. And then the whole time you're walking around with just walls up the whole time." And it got so bad that, and I never shared anything with anybody, I never told anybody anything, but about 8 years ago, I just thought I had a cold. And I was congested in my chest and I couldn't breathe, the cough would go away, kind of like what's going on today. And my safe place was work. I would work all day, I would just throw myself into work. And I went to work, but it took me 20 minutes to walk from the parking lot into the building, because every 2 seconds I had to stop and take a deep breath and then let it out. And it was like, as long as I get to work, I'll be fine. Once I'm there, the bathroom's right here, I won't go nowhere, I won't move, but I gotta get there. And my boss came in and told me, she says, "It's not safe for you to be here." She said, "You need to go to a hospital." I said, "No, I'm good." She said, "No, you're not. You're not good." So that, within a week of that time, my brother had cancer and we were going for his chemotherapy, and we went up to his house and he says, "What's wrong with you?" Because all I could do was get in the chair and I just flopped. I was swollen everywhere, everything was going on. I said, "I'm okay, I'll be okay, I just gotta breathe. If I can breathe, I'll be okay." He said, "No, you're not." So he's trying to take me to the hospital. When I went to the hospital, they told me I had congestive heart failure. I had 3 clots in my legs, 2 clots in my lungs. They said, if you did not show up today, you would not have made it through the night. And I say that to say this: I do not let stress or anything else overcome me anymore. You can't see the internal pain. You see the physical pain, but internally, I was going through and nobody understood. Not my family, not my mother, not anybody. My daughter was the only one that was willing to tell me, "Mom, don't let me be an excuse for you to stay in this situation." But she says, "You're using us as a crutch because you feel like you have to keep it together for us. You got to do it for us." And she said, She said, "Don't be using me because you got yourself in this mess."
You raised her, right? You raised her so she could tell you that message. That is powerful. Our bodies scream out to us, don't they? The body was screaming. Yeah. And just amazing. Well, thank you for sharing that. Thank you. And how much we silence our bodies. We don't receive the message. I'm so glad you got it. And thank for your baby. Thank goodness for your baby. Thank God for your baby.
He told me, he said, "Listen," I said, "I'm just going to trust you, do what you got to do." He said, "No, baby, that ain't how it works." He said, "Listen," he says, "we're going to pray and we're going to wait." He said, "That's what we're going to do." That was my diagnosis the whole time. We're going to pray and we're going to wait. And I kept saying, "When can I go back to work?" He said, "Honey, we're going to pray and we're going to wait." And then a year later, he told me, he said, "Honey, you got a second chance in life." He says, because 3 out of 10 people survive the condition that you were in. He says, but within 6 months' time, you don't have no clots, you don't have no pressure, everything is fine. He says, you got a second chance in life.
Thank you.
He says, live your life. And that's why I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you for living with us. Thank you so much for that.
We didn't talk about this at the table, but I just feel compelled to share. And I'm not gonna cry. Like 10 years ago, I had, and not many people know this, but I had a serious bout with shingles. And I thought I was managing my stress. I had a situation with my son, and I went for a walk and woke up the next morning and my body was just covered with these spots. And they didn't hurt, by the grace of God. I didn't have any pain. But I went to my doctor and didn't know what it was, and she pulled me in and she started poking on them. And she's like, it looks like it's something. You know, doctor speak. I had no idea what she was talking about. But then she stopped suddenly and she put me on the table and she said, I don't know what you're doing. She said, but whatever it is, you're gonna have to stop because it's gonna take you out of here. And that was a serious wake-up call for me because I thought I was living a healthy life. I thought I was taking yoga, I was teaching yoga at Trinity. Some of y'all know me. I was walking every day, I was eating vegetables, and doing all what I thought I was supposed to be doing, but somehow something was sticking in me. And it was making me sick. And it took me about 3 years to get my body to the point where inflammation wasn't just hurting everywhere, everything. And I still struggle with it. I still had to stop and say, okay, no. That's one word I've learned. I've had to learn to breathe deep and eat right, drink water, get my sleep. But one thing that I do know is that stress will kill you if you don't check it. And your body will tell you before it does it, you have to pay attention. I'll get my eyes swell up, my joints will hurt, things will happen. But when that happens, I say, okay, I hear you. I'm not going to work today.
It's the listening that we got to do.
So I just want to piggyback on that and say to all of us strong black women, we ain't got to be that strong. We can stop, we can breathe, we can sleep, we can drink our water, we can pray, we can cry, we can scream, but we gotta take care of ourselves.
Can strength be kind? Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much. Because that's a really important message. And let's do one more before we move on, because I want to make sure we get to do our final thing. But can we say that if we cry, that is an expression of strength? We do not need to apologize for it. We don't need to be scared if somebody's crying in front of us. Right? Sometimes it makes us really scared.
Yes, I just wanted to say, we had talked about it a little bit, but one thing I had to learn that was so hard for me, as I guess being the only child and people pleaser, was learning the magic word of no. I literally had to stand in front of the mirror and practice saying no, because I always say yes, to whatever people wanted. So that's my boundary I had to set, just to try to get some type of peace.
I love that, because it has to be intentional. Like sometimes we just have to practice. It's nothing fancy, we just have to say no. Like in all different forms. We all can, I'm gonna borrow that. I'll say I got it here, but I'm gonna borrow it. One of my patients told me, she said, I learned no is a complete sentence. And I said, I'm gonna borrow that too. I'll let them know where it came from, but no is a complete sentence. No, period. Okay. No, don't apologize.
So I was just talking to my friend last night about the word no, and something that my therapist said to me just this week as I was getting ready to get on the road to drive here. And I was telling her because of the situation, I was having trouble saying completely no. And so then she said, well, why don't you want to just say no? Or just say directly, no, I can't do that. And I said, well, you know, it might hurt the person's feelings or, well, no, seriously, I mean, okay. So people who have done that, I just need to listen. So she said, why are you responsible for that?
Yeah.
She said, why don't you let that person take their tissue and to their therapist and talk about it? And be solid in it. And so that was very profound for me. And I just wanted to share that because that's not my responsibility.
Thank you
I
for
won't be
sharing.
on time, but it's still not my responsibility on how you receive my no.
I'm responsible for my mental health, right? The people around us and around me can remind me what I need to do, but I'm responsible for me. And if everybody just can own and practice and take, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, one second. I got one last thing for everybody I want to get to.
Okay, good morning. I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what both of you said. And I know we're at the conference and everybody say trust in the Lord. Jesus will make a way, but there's nothing like going to counseling. And for women, we need to know, I'm a Christian and I believe that Jesus died for my sins. But I do know the value of professional counseling, and that is very important. As we as Black people, we think that we don't need to do that, and that you know Jesus died on the cross, so you don't need to do that, and you're strong. And as other women have said that they're strong, you don't have to be strong. But I just want to share the value of counseling, because I got to leave here early because our group starts at an hour.
Well, thank you. Yes, and it's not an either or, it's a yes and, right? It could be an and. Okay, so the last thing I want to invite there was a question. Well, so she said, I have a problem with people finishing my sentences, trying to rush me through, and cutting me off. And she said, what can I do? And so people will do that, right? So with people close to you in your circle, you can say, that really bothers me, please give me time. You can say, if you see me put my hand up, it's asking for more time, right? Right? With other people, if you're in a work or like a meeting, you can say, I take a little extra time to speak, I prefer not to be cut off, right? It's just my rate of speech. Trust me, it's worth the wait. And you can say, I'd like to finish my thought. Because you're speaking my language. It's a pet peeve when people cut me off. It's some work I'm still up doing. But, you can say, I'd like to finish my thought. And you can start to cue people into what they're doing. Because oftentimes they don't know they're doing it. It's their anxiety, it's their, and you can say, I'd like to finish my thought. If I could finish my thought before you go on. Or you could go, I want to, you can use kind of sounds, because sometimes it's hard for some of us to come up with actual full sentences to set boundary. But you can, so if you're about to engage with somebody that does it, you can say, you know what, I just want to make sure I can finish my thought. So there are subtle ways, and it's not rude, right? They're thinking about what they want to say. She said, for you, it's like not listening to you. So I know we have lots of things, but I want to make sure we get to do one last shared activity together. And it's because as Black women, you know, we're talking about reconnecting, rest, right? Really rest, right? So we're reconnecting. And our ancestors used water and used gathering water. We gathered at watering places to have shared experiences, to gather life force and life source for our families, to bathe, to clean clothes, to cook. And so I'd like us to close with a water ritual, right? A water, something. And so if you have water in front of you, I'd like for you to just get it handy. If you need a cup of water, there's water in the back. If you have coffee and you say, I'm gonna imagine this is water, then that's fine too. But I want you to take a moment and get a cup of water and use it as an excuse. You know, so you've been sitting a while, stretch out. If you have something to drink a while, roll your neck out. Practice that body scan. So at your tables, I'm going to ask you to share, and I'm going to ask you to share and keep your own time, right? Because we're going to come together after about 8 minutes. So if you know, I can talk, I can keep myself at a minute, at about 45 seconds, okay? But if you need to look at a watch, or if you need to have your neighbor time you because you know you're a talker, you can do that. Okay, so however you want to kind of regulate that for yourself. But at your tables, I'd love for you, and I want to invite you to go around and one at a time, take a sip of your water or whatever liquid, and share something that you're thirsting for in your life. Speaking this to community makes it real for you and helps your community hold you accountable when you speak it aloud. So one at a time, take a sip of water and share something that you are thirsting for in your life. I'll call you back in about 8 minutes.
And although I've been pretty good with it, but I have to do better. Because this is where my body is telling me I can't sustain it.
Figure out what I should be doing at this point in my life. Or should I be doing anything? I retired in 2015. Before the pandemic, I did a lot of volunteering.
To become the husband and father that he needs to be, because he will be 43 on his birthday. And so my thirst is for him to man up.
I'll settle down, I'll stop working. What I'm realizing from myself and all my sisters around me is that it's never going to stop. There's always something that is going to pull you away from God, pull you away from your time with yourself, pull you into
what I thirst for. Just a very great level of discernment when it comes to relationships and the energy and the courage to release those that are not good and be okay with it.
Wait a minute. My mom went back 40 years. Where were these women, you know, that you had in your life when we were together? So I just right now I'm just thirsty for some peace. Peace. Because it's a big destruction. You know, and I didn't think it was going to be. And I'm having feelings of resentment toward.
So I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all for allowing me to share this space with you, taking the chance and the risk to connect with each other at your tables in the ways that you did. One of my favorite quotes, Angela Davis said that it's in collectivities that we find reservoirs of hope and optimism. And that's what we did today. We created our collection, our community. If dark moments appear for you, When you're struggling to sit alone with yourself, be reminded of this community. You're actually joined by God, by this community right here in spirit. Once you have a healthy connection with yourself, you can begin to pay attention to the types of relationships you want to cultivate, types of relationships you might want to end, so that you can be the best version of yourself. Have faith. It's a chance to create these for hope and healing, to build community for healing ourselves and each other. Thank you so much. Thank you.